Last week, we launched our lesson on solving quadratic equations, and we looked at factoring or graphing as one method in solving quadratic equations that are factorable. So this week, we're going to look at two other methods, namely square root and completing the square. So what I need you to do first is, if you haven't updated your foldable, we'll go ahead and copy the notes that I wrote in the foldable part for square root. So our essential question for this topic is, how can you determine the number of solutions of a quadratic equation of the form ax squared plus ac? So I want you to look at the form that we're going to look at. We're looking at, quadratic functions that are binomials, right? So this, um, this quadratic function here or equation is a binomial, and it has a quadratic term. So the quadratic term is given by the ax squared, and c is the constant. So it is a binomial because it has a quadratic term and a constant. So if you're going to solve equations of this form, you have to isolate. Okay, so you have to isolate the squared term. So how are you going to do that? So if you're given ax squared plus c is equal to 0, first you have to move the c over. So then you will have ax squared is equal to negative c. Now, regardless of the value of a, whether it's a perfect square or not a perfect square, you have to divide both sides by a. So that will give you x squared is equal to negative c over a. So that is the first step in solving quadratic equations by square root. Isolate the x squared term, and let's see what the next steps would look like in the examples that I'm going to show you. So the first example is 3x squared minus 27 is equal to 0. So just like what I said earlier, we're going to isolate the x squared term. So let's move the 27 over, and we'll get 3x squared is equal to 27. Now, let's divide both sides by 3. So we'll get x squared is equal to 9. And then after that, we're going to get the square root of both sides. There you go. And the radical and the exponent will be cancelled because the square root of a perfect square is just a variable or the quantity itself. So you will have x is equal to square root of 9, but the square root of 9 could be positive or negative 3. So that means you actually have two solutions, and they are x is equal to positive 3 and negative 3. Let's look at another example here. So by moving 10 to the other side, we'll get x squared is equal to negative 10 plus 10, right? Because here you're moving the negative 10 to the right hand side of the equation. So now you will have x is equal to 0, because negative 10 and positive 10 cancel out. So if you get the square root, I forgot to put the x squared over here. That's going to be x squared. So if you get the square root of 0, since 0 is neutral, it's neither positive nor negative, then we're just going to have x is equal to 0. So in this case, we only have one solution. Oops. And that solution is just x is equal to 0. Alright, so those are some examples on how to solve quadratic equations for using square roots.